Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Peter Defty, and today we're going to chat about OFM, Arizona Trail, and it's kind of living your dreams and how proper health and metabolic function helps drive that. So Peter, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do?
Hi, I'm Peter Defty, and I'm also known as the Vespa guy and the pioneer of this whole program called OFM that's starting to gain a little bit of traction. And I want to clarify it's not keto. If you're not familiar with OFM, don't instantly go there to keto, because while we use some aspects of the ketogenic diet to at certain times to help drive optimal fat metabolism, it's not a high fat diet. It's a fat burning diet, because the whole simple elevator pitch about this is the reason humans can store a lot of fat is because that's what we're meant to burn for our aerobic metabolism. And glucose and glycogen are our fight or fight fuel. So we have robust stores of both when we use them for what they're meant to be used for. And so if you're new to Peter and Vespa and OFM and guys like Jeff Browning and Peter Mortimer and Nick Curry and all the other people who are on this, don't think keto or paleo so much as think, oh, I've got these thousands of calories on me that I need to tap into. So yeah, I pioneered that. And I'm also the general manager for Vespa Power Products, which is a totally natural catalyst to help jumpstart that. And that's a tool we use in OFM, just like we use the tool of diet, tool of supplementation, tool of exercise and lifestyle. These are all tools. So thinking about it in terms of you and your physiology and metabolism. That's what I do. That's what I geek out on. I do the deep dive and go down the rabbit hole so you don't have to.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot of data, and that's the interesting thing about Vespas. It's all data backed. It's not some pseudoscience, whatever. And it's important to have that, I think, because there's so much misinformation or just bad information floating around the internet these days. And you can kind of find anything to validate what you believe in, but in the end, it comes down to data and hard facts and what actually works.
Yeah, and one of the data points we do use is we use the science of nature, not just the man-made lab, because you can produce data by setting up your experimental design in the way you want to get the results. And if anything, that's the problem with science. And the problem is the average consumer, when somebody brings out some scientifically published paper, the average consumer doesn't know what level tier journal it was published in, the what was the experimental design, how are the stats were done, and so they just assume it's valid because it's touted as science. And I'm asking the audience that next time you see something as science, step back and think on your own about it, is because we all have that capacity to think and reason and make sense of things. So, and my core is I always go back to what were those evolutionary pressures that shaped us, and evolutionary biology, all these things make perfect sense to me. It always makes sense when I go back, and that's where things like Vespa, we're harnessing the science of nature, not the man-made lab, and this was just an accidental discovery like penicillin or many other things, other breakthrough scientific discoveries. They were actually just accidental discoveries observing something that went on in nature. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating. It's interesting that there are like a ton of just really poor quality studies out there. And just like you're saying, a lot of scientists will, and it seems a little more prevalent these days, or maybe we've just noticed it more these days after the whole virus thing the past couple of years. But the amount of just poor quality nutritional studies and viral studies have just been like all over the place. Like there's just so many of them. And so just because you see a study that says one thing, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily accurate. It could just be these scientists that are funded by an organization or a company or a government that wants a specific outcome, and they find that outcome versus finding, I don't know, like something that could be helpful to people. They find what they're supposed to find.
Yeah, that's precisely right. And even good studies, let me frame this for the audience. Even good studies, these scientific studies, they're really meant to help us understand something in the context of that study. Because when you do good experimental design, the hypothesis is actually to try to prove yourself wrong. And that's the toughest thing, because we all have confirmational bias. We're all right. And so you're trying to prove yourself wrong, but you really want to prove yourself right. And you collect this data to do so. And, you know, the problem is when you do that, you're looking at one aspect of a biological system and you're trying to control all the other variables. So that's how science works. Good science, good experimental design. Now, think about this. How does that work in the real world, where the variables are all over the map? They're all dynamic and changing. So it really doesn't. So science is there to help us understand a certain aspect of something. And unfortunately, what happens is we humans try to simplify things. And so all of a sudden these studies get brought out, and then there's some marketing around it or some bias. And then all of a sudden it focuses on one thing. And the perfect example I'll use is the FASTER study, which was done on athletes. I actually helped to get that adapted, and it was pretty breakthrough because it did get published in a very high tier journal, and it was very well done science. But the inference of FASTER was keto adaptation is the solution to sports performance. And it really created a lot of controversy when it came out. And then a lot of people who had a more carbohydrate based thing started doing keto diets to see if it actually worked, because the science was there. And they failed. I think a guy named Matt Lane, do you know him, up in Idaho?
The name sounds really familiar, but I don't know him
Yeah.
personally.
And a lot of other guys, started tinkering with it and weren't getting anywhere. Well, the ketogenic diet, or aspects of the ketogenic diet, were only one part of OFM. And what people didn't know when the FASTER study was being pushed out is like, oh, here we can perform on fat just as well, was that the low carb diet cohort, none of those guys in the real world did a strict keto diet. They only did strict keto diet during the study data collection, right? And so that was to understand the aspects of the keto diet. But in the real world, they were doing OFM, they were using Vespa. That's why they were winning races. So when people took that inference from the FASTER study and tried to do straight keto in the real world, their performance failed. You see what I'm saying? You can't
Definitely
take that one thing in a study and then all of a sudden try to bring it into the real world and think it's going to work, because the real world has all these variables. And like the FASTER study is a perfect example. And that's, see, I'm not even picking on somebody in the carbohydrate side of the world. It's even in our own fat-based camp, we're all susceptible to that sort of thing.
definitely. And that's a good point. Like I read a study, and I can't remember the name or who did it or even the athletes involved, but essentially it was like they took some marathon runners and they went from a super high carb intake, which is normal for marathon running, and they put them on a keto diet for like a week or two. Like what they said was a keto diet. So they just like reduced their carbs, I think, to like 100 a day, which is not necessarily keto. And then they all had poor performances, and it's because, well, they didn't give them any time to adapt. And they're all obviously going to feel sluggish, and their times are going to drop because they go from like a high glucose diet to a high fat diet. And it's like, well, yeah, I didn't run faster, so keto's a joke. And it's like, well, you didn't allow time to adapt. It's not like you just took caffeine or something, like something that just reacts immediately. And so I think it's important to look at studies, but then also evaluate them and look at, like you're saying, all the variables there to make sure it works. And in the end too, it's like keto is a tool. Like obviously you're gonna run faster on a bunch of sugar, because it's like I don't know, it's like high octane race fuel versus diesel or something.
It's crack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like hitting the nitrous oxide booster on your car.
Yeah. 100%.
Right.
But I think in the end though, and like this has become a lot more prevalent on the internet now, and at least from things that I've seen, is that keto, like you were saying when we first started, is more of a tool versus an actual just like diet for the rest of your life. It's like going carnivore for a while. Like, yeah, it might have a lot of good, your body might react really well to it and might fix a lot of things. But in the end, though, it's probably not beneficial just to eat just beef and salt every day. Like you can add in other things and that can optimize your fat metabolism and fix things. And then you can become stronger from it. And then
Yeah,
you could be eating like fruit or honey or like dairy or something.
absolutely. You know, let's just briefly swing over to the carbohydrate side of it, because one of the best studies to ever come out were the studies out of Sweden on carb loading, the original carb loading studies.
Mm-hmm.
And those were done in the early 60s, I believe. And it in when they did those studies, what they did was they took young male competitive athletes and they put them through a mild, not a keto, but a mild carb restriction for a couple of weeks, and then loaded them the last 3 days. Now, remember, context means everything. And the context was this was the early 60s. And back in the 50s and 60s, until Ansel Keys and the cholesterol, red meat, saturated fat heart hypothesis came out, it was just well known and well pushed that you know athletes ate things like steak and eggs and liver. You know, they may not like the liver, but they ate liver every 2 weeks, and they ate, steak and eggs were a staple with athletes. And sure, they had plenty of carbs in their diet, but they also had plenty of meat and plenty of fat. They weren't on a low fat, high carb diet. And so they took these guys who were young competitive males, so high testosterone, which covers up a whole lot of sins, and they're competitive, and they put them through a mild carb restriction, which if they're already athletic, they're already pretty metabolically fit. They weren't eating super high carb to where they had to eat every 2 or 3 hours. And they put them through a mild carb restriction, which is usually what happens when somebody's already somewhat adapted. And then they gave them, and it works. And that's exactly what we do in OFM. So in the context of that, it worked. But then everybody saw that thing. Oh, you load with carbs, you go faster. Well, then all of a sudden it's like you eat carbs on top of carbs all the time. And then all those unintended consequences of insulin, hormonal imbalance creep in, the lack of nutrition because you're burning glucose all the time. You're not burning fat, i.e. cholesterol, for all the things you need to have healthy, strong cells. All that stuff started to creep in because people were taking that study and applying the main point about carb loading to everything in the life. If a little's good, more's better, the American way, right? Super. And so it's all about context. And that's what that's the big take home is scientific studies are there to help us understand a certain aspect of what we're studying. And then, but applying that is a very different thing. And that's kind of what we do at OFM. We apply it and get the real world results. And, as we're backing it up with data on those results. We're not doing science. I'm going to be engaging a couple of academics to take some of that data and we'll do some scientific methodology like double-blind placebo-controlled testing so we can do a study, or he can do a study independent of me. But we're going to continue to collect data to back up those real world experiences, including the ones you're seeing.
Definitely. And just speaking of data and scientific studies again, the whole like the 7-country studies by Ansel Keys has been debunked so many times. It's so laughable, but it's still very prominent in nutritional literature. And like the
and
people that don't know,
the inference of it that cholesterol and saturated fat are going to kill you and red meat are going to kill you, the inference of it is just remains pervasive.
yeah, which is insane because one, he cherry picked data to back himself up. He did more than 7 countries and just cherry picked the countries that would back up his hypothesis, which goes back to what we talked to initially at the start of this conversation. But then two, it's just kind of like, well, if meat and cholesterol is so bad, or they're so bad for you, how did all these civilizations for the past thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, how do they not all have heart disease and cholesterol like we're supposed to have, or high cholesterol from eating meat? Like it makes no sense. Like you can look at these like hunter-gatherer tribes that eat mainly meat, and like just animal products, and they don't have high cholesterol, they don't have heart disease. And so
Yep.
obviously something we're doing now is wrong, and it's not meat and these animal products, yet they've been demonized for who knows which reason. Like you could go off on a million theories about it, but in the end, it's just kind of insane that people would say that, like, hey, don't eat something that came from nature and has been eaten for millions of years. And I'm not saying anything natural is necessarily healthy, but
Yeah.
things that have been proven to be healthy for thousands and thousands of years, like it's like, okay, that's common sense that we should be eating those and not some like lab made garbage, or just taking supplements every day, or trying to be like vegan or something because that's supposed to be healthy now or something. It's like, how did
Yeah.
our bodies change?
That's exactly right. We're supremely healthy. Our evolutionary pressures gave us the genetics to be supremely healthy. I mean, that's one thing all of us need to understand. We all have that genetic pool that got us here, had to be robust. Okay. That genetic pool of what makes you you and your DNA that got you here. What got you here was robust gene pool. And unless you have some sort of genetic defect you were born with, which is, you know, a minuscule part of the population, you've got the genetic pool to be robust. But that same, like I was saying earlier, that same benefit can also be your undoing in today's world. Those same genes will turn on you um, if they're not used right. And part of the thing is like when you look at people like the Maasai or their still nomadic cousins, the Hudsu, you're right. They're on a diet that's high in fat and protein and not a lot of carbohydrates. And on occasion there's carbohydrates, but not a lot. But they all enjoy robust health. They have no um, modern healthcare or modern dental care, and yet they live well into their 70s on average if they make it past that first couple of years of childbirth. um, and it's just like, how does that happen? And one of the things is our bodies are supremely efficient, so we're very active, and we're evolved to be very active. And once you get that nutritional balance right, the amount of food you eat is very little. And that's a big problem today because we do too little, and we have too easy access to way too many calories and too much nutrition. So, it's like I say, and we're not going to, we want to bring some reality. This whole thing about killing your hunger, we can manage it and attenuate it. But the reason we have a hunger trigger, and that goes doubly for women because they're meant to eat and save for two. Um, the reason we have a hunger trigger is because that's what got us off our butts to go hunt and gather. And that's the thing, to get food, it also required a lot of physical activity. And I'm not a person who believes in this feast or famine hypothesis for most of the population throughout most of human existence. I'm a believer in the feasting and fasting model, because when you look at the journals of explorers when they came to North America or went to Africa, and even today when people go into Eastern Russia or Mongolia or these relatively uninhabited lands, game was plentiful. I mean, it just it was crazy how much game was there. That you talk about the Plains Indians when they when the explorers here, they said that the plains would turn black with buffalo. It's like it wasn't a problem in terms of food supply. It was the harvesting of that food that took a lot of energy. And so what I want to bring this home to today's world. What I found is when you get that nutritional balance of what I call whole animal eating, some people call it nose to tail. When you get that balance of nutrition right, even even though I'm a big proponent of animal foods and I have a bias to eating meat, I like it. Um, I have to say, the amount of animal products you need to eat when you have that balance right is so small, it's scary.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Like I I don't remember when it was exactly. I was just thinking of like a certain experience where I ate a bunch of just like refined carbohydrates, and like I ate like a lot. I ate like $20 worth of just stuff. And at the end of eating it, I was like, wow, I probably just ate like 2,000 calories, and I'm still hungry. And then I can go buy like a half a pound steak and eat that, and I'm like, okay, like I feel pretty good because there's like actual
Yep.
density to it
That's
versus
right.
just
Your body's not
stuff.
hunting for the food. And here's the thing. When you frame this in the context of the environment we evolved in, everything makes the physiology and metabolism make perfect sense because it's like it's perfect. It was designed perfectly for for our natural environment because when you think about it, when fruit was ripe and berries were ripe or tubers were ripe or we found honey, those were brief sporadic events during the year, 3 to 5 times a year, right? And when those things were ripe, you had to eat as much as you could of that no risk food source before it started to ferment and rot. And so that mechanism, that physiological metabolic mechanism of eating a ton of carbs, passing out from the blood sugar drop when the insulin hits, right? You pass out and then you wake up an hour later and you're bloated, you feel like crap, but guess what? You're still hungry, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it makes total sense in that context. Like it really rigged us to be able to be efficient. And then a day or two after 2 or 3 days of hunting, of gathering berries or eating fruit, we went back to fasting and hunting animals. And so it's a beautiful, perfect mechanism in the environment that shaped us as humans. But in the environment today that we man-made created, it's turned into a disaster.
Yeah, essentially we're just in berry picking season 24/7, 365.
Right,
And
that's right. And it's like I say, when you think about it, we're really robust. So in this in that evolutionary time that shaped us, we had concentrated forms of carbohydrates 3 to 5 times a year, not 3 to 5 times a day for decades, which is
yeah,
exactly what most people are doing now. And this is where our robustness has kind of gone sideways, um, in terms of that. And then, of course, we push ourselves way over the edge of that robustness to where you see all these diseases and things pop up, and now we've dumbed down health to where it's what we consider as healthy is really unhealthy. I mean, I think when people look at people like us, or more specifically somebody like Jeff Browning, um, as an outlier, and I think Zach Bitter has a podcast called Human Outliers, and I sit there and think about it's like, no, nobody's an outlier. Nobody, there's these aren't outliers. This is what normal should be. We all can be. We shouldn't think of these people as outliers. We should think of these people as this is what normal should be, and this is what we should aspire to.
yeah, which is wild when you think about it, because something like 10% of the American population is metabolically healthy, and which is insane. Because then you look at people like Browning or Bitter, and like, oh, you guys are freaks of nature, and it's like, well, they're just how we're supposed to be. Like you're saying, like they're not drinking alcohol every day. They're not just eating 3 to 4,000 calories of just carbohydrates every day.
Or three
It,
or four pounds of meat, of steak,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Like there's a lot of balance there. And I think that's what with OFM is the main thing. And like throughout all human history, it's all been about this balance. But now where everything's so easy, it's like there's never any sort of balance where it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
what's the easiest and what's the most like rewarding, quote unquote. And it's like, yeah, well, you just go buy candy and whatever, and so things are like super palatable and just they taste super good. But then it's like you can just eat them all day and there's zero nutritional density in them, and then it just degrades your health over time because you're not getting any real protein, not getting any real fat, you're not getting like just anything really. It's just
Right. And
calories.
it's shifting your metabolism to glucose metabolism, which is
Yeah,
just energy production, whereas fat metabolism is a much more complex and nuanced thing. And that's the thing. It's like all our cells, our hormones, our enzymes, everything about us is made on fat metabolism. It's lipid metabolism, cholesterol. Cholesterol is a fat packed molecule with proteins and all these other elements in it. And so the more you push glucose metabolism, that fight or flight fuel, it's crisis management. It's like you're meant to burn that for those big pushes and surges when you have to. Um, because it's essentially been designed into us to get away from the tiger when it jumps out of the bush, or be able to either defend ourselves or fight when you're raiding another tribe. Um, it's that sporadic thing. But when you burn a lot of glucose, you're just making energy. You're not making all the other elements. And this we actually saw in the 2012 Western State study, which is the study that never got published, but actually was the principal driver of the FASTER study. And that was the data of the fatty acid cheek cell swabs they did with the two cohorts, the traditional carbohydrate fueled Western States runners and then the OFM Vespa runners. The recovery was just night and day between the two groups, because these guys had fat metabolism. Their cells bounced back right back from all that oxidative stress of running 100 miles.
Yeah, like look at Jeff Browning, like after he did the rim to rim to rim to rim, whatever, 5 rims, okay, double rim
How
rim to
many
rim.
rims he did? Yeah.
It's a lot of rims. After he did that, like he recovered fairly quickly. Obviously, he's eating properly and doing some cross train after, and he crushed it right after. He ran Hard Rock to, I think, 5th
Well, he
place
did
is what it
Scout
was.
Mountain,
Oh
and
yeah,
then Hard Rock.
he
He
did
won
Scout
Scout
Mountain.
Mountain, set the course record.
Yeah, and then
And
Hard Rock.
get this, Derek, and this is the robustness of evolution again. I took a look at Jeff's ultra running, ultra sign up data. And from last year's Hard Rock, which was July 16th, to this year's Hard Rock, which was July 15th. Okay. So 1 year to 1 year. Okay. A year to year, starting with last year's Hard Rock and ending with this year's Hard Rock. He finished 5th in both of them. So top 5 for probably arguably the hardest mountain 100 in the world. He's on the podium at 50, right? Okay, so he was doing some sort of epic big event 8 times in that year. So every 6 weeks, he was doing something big. All right. That's the thing. And that correlates with the data I've seen over the years coaching athletes. Between 5 and 7 weeks, they're peaking again for the next event, because they not only recover faster, but they get the super compensation or the training effect from that event that makes them stronger, more robust to get them peaking for the next event.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, at least for me, that like kind of got me into, I don't know, diet's always been interesting to me, but like eating the OFM style and using keto as a tool and whatever. And I'm by far no means an expert like Browning or Bitter or something, but like eating that way and like focusing on diet and these other, like I guess more like primal type things, I guess, that fit our biology. It's like you're able to do more, and like that's the main thing that draws me to it. And I think other people is like, if you eat properly, you can train harder, but then you can also recover faster, which means you can do more cool stuff. Like you look at like marathon runners, they generally do like what, 2 to 3 marathons a year at their full potential, and then they're just kind of done. They're either training or just recovering a lot. But then if with Browning's doing like something big every 6 weeks, like you're saying, it's like that has a lot to do with eating properly and recovering properly, because like most people can't run that many hundreds or big efforts in a year. Like it's just gonna destroy you. It's like you have like 1 or 2 big events a year and then a bunch of smaller ones that lead up to it. So I think just all I'm getting at is that like eating properly and working out properly means you can train harder, you can recover faster, and you can do more cool stuff, which I think is what we all want to do in life, whether that's running 100 milers or longer, like ultra endurance cycling events, or even just like being healthy to hang out with your family as you age. Like your knees don't hurt and your body doesn't hurt because you're actually healthy.
Yeah, and that's that supreme efficiency. I just pulled up his ultra sign up stuff. So last year's Hard Rock 5th place. Then September 11th, he did Mongolon Monster and won that. Then he did Blood Rock in December, won that. Then he did Sean O'Brien 100K was second overall there. Um, I, and then he did 3 days of Asilamo, won the 50K and won the overall. And then he did scout. Then he did the rim to rim to rim, right? That you filmed in April.
Yeah.
And then he did Scout Mountain, won that, set a course record, and then he did Hard Rock. Now, you know, not even Jim Walmsley is competing that much. You know, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
A guy
totally.
that's 20 years younger than Jeff can't have that kind of turnaround. And
Yeah.
you know, and Jim is supremely gifted. I mean, he's dedicated. He's got the genetics. He's got the you know, you look at him run and he's like a friggin' gazelle, right?
Yeah, and he definitely lives by a high carb diet and he promotes it and whatever, and it works for him as far as training. But I think a lot of people wonder like how long that's going to last for. Like how many high mileage weeks can you put in just eating like just essentially pure carbohydrates on a low protein or lower fat diet. And obviously it's working. Like he's running UTMB right now, and like I'm not following the updates. They just started 45 minutes ago, I think. But I'm sure he's doing well. Like he dedicates his life, and Jim is like he's a very dedicated person. Like he focuses on something and goes for it. But it kind of makes me wonder though, like if he could compete more potentially if he changed his diet around, or if maybe according to his genetics and biology that works for him. But I don't really know. Obviously, like I'm never going to be at Jim's level of racing or running, but the diet side of it is pretty interesting just to compare and contrast Jeff, who's
Yeah,
now
and I
51
don't
with
want to I
Jim.
don't want to knock anybody here, but you
Yeah.
know, we're not here to knock you because Jim is just he's on, you know, he's on another planet. But you know, in for ultra running, yeah, because of his genetics, he's got that little bit of edge. But every one of us, you know, our genetic material is pretty much the same up to like 99%. It's that
Hmm.
that little 1% difference, you know, height, weight, build, whatever that gives it. But then you have to add in those variables of dedication. You know, what was your environment growing up? What was your all kinds of things
Hmm.
that play into this. But let's kind of get back on track about this thing. What I wanted to say is like, you know, you get very efficient when you get that nutritional balance in place and all that. And that kind of leads me to, you know, you approached me about this, doing this epic adventure of hiking the Arizona Trail and not trying to set an FKT, but just run hiking it and filming it and really capturing the experience and you know, how, you know, being fat adapted, OFM fat adapted, where you're really optimized. So you're in that balance where you don't need a whole lot of calories, makes it, you know, easy. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Do you want to hear more specifically about the trail or
The
nutrition stuff for
trail,
it?
the whole thing. I want to hear about the whole experience because it's that's why I wanted to, when you reached out, I said, sure, I'd be happy to support this because this is the kind of thing I not only want you to experience, but by filming it, you can bring that to others, but also it'll inspire other people to do the kind of things they're going to do. Like, you know, a week from Saturday, I'm going to do Ray Lakes Loop in a day, and
Cool.
that's a 44 mile, up to 12,000 feet elevation, tough run hike, but and you can do it in a day. It's usually a 3 to 5 day backpack, but um, we do it in a day run, and it's a long day, but it's epic, but it's nothing like spending a month on the Arizona Trail or several months on the PCT like a lot of people do.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so the Arizona Trail, just for context, it just traverses the whole state, north to south or south to north, I guess, depending which way you go. Generally in the fall, people go north to south for better weather. As it does start fairly high. Well, it starts on the Utah border with Arizona and then cuts all the way through and ends up on the Mexican border.
What
So
are what are the closest towns on each end?
so on the northern side would be Kanab, Utah, or Fredonia. I guess technically Grand Canyon Village is closer, but there's a giant canyon in the middle of that. Um,
There's a giant ditch you have to traverse.
yeah, a giant ditch. Yeah, so most people kind of base out of Kanab, and it's just there's a whole bunch of popular trails and stuff around there. But yeah, it starts at a campground there on the border, cuts up through the Kaibab Plateau to the North Rim trailhead of the Grand Canyon. So that's about mile 80 or so. And then you traverse the canyon, just like a rim to rim. You hit Grand Canyon Village and you go south to Flagstaff and then through Pine, Arizona, which is where Jeff ran Muggy on Monster like last year, or the year before or something. And then you traverse down into more of the desert area at that point. You kind of drop off these plateaus and you
You
go
go into
from,
Sedona?
no, you don't. It goes more on the eastern side, where Sedona
Okay.
is more west.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah, so you drop off that plateau and you go from like these higher altitude, well, not necessarily altitude, it's 6, 7,000 feet, so it's a lot higher and cooler than say the rest of it. But then once you drop down, you're in the Roosevelt Lake area, which is you're in the saguaros and like legitimate desert. And then you start making your way towards Tucson. Then you hit all the Sky Islands, which are these like little mountain ranges that are just kind of like they're islands technically, I guess, like in the desert of just like high altitude points. So like you go over Mount Lemon, which is just under 10,000 feet.
Do
Um,
you before you get to Mount Lemon, do you go through the superstitions? Because you're going to be going
yes, you do. That's by the
you're
Roosevelt Lake
east
area.
of Phoenix, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you go through there, which is a super cool wilderness area. Like I've ran out there a few times and every time I've done it, it's always been cooler and wet for some reason. And it definitely won't be when I start this year, but it's a really beautiful area and it's just really, really cool. And then you hit like Tucson area, which is where I live, and we run like those trails all the time. And like I ran a 50K on part of the AZT last year.
So
And then
you come down through Oracle before you hit the Catalinas?
yes, sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so then you get up there and you hit the mountain ranges, so you kind of go from like up high down low, so it's a little bit of like hot and cold type stuff. And then you go through Patagonia area, which is a little small town, which is super fun. It's like right on the trail, small little detour, and then yeah, then you end up at the Mexican border. So it's a 800-ish mile trail, goes through mountains, desert, and kind of everything. So I think a lot of people think of Arizona as just straight up desert with saguaros and coyotes and stuff, but the trail is really diverse and it causes a lot of issues for people because they assume like, oh, it's just gonna be hot the whole time. But like when you're at the North Rim, you're at like 9,000 feet. And then suddenly you drop down to the canyon and it's hot, and then you're up in the plateau and it's cooler, but then you drop down to the desert. So you get a lot of flat and a lot of mountains and a lot of temperature changes in that whole time. And I've been kind of intrigued with it for a long time. Like I remember watching some video about a girl that did it like, I don't even know, like maybe 10 years ago. And I was just like, whoa, like what is this? Like that's crazy because I've only had ever heard of the PCT and the AT at that point. And it's like, oh, there's all these other smaller, like well, shorter trails, quote unquote. It's still an 800-mile trail, and it's just a cool area, and it's just kind of where I live, and I've always kind of lived in this area. It really fascinated me, and so I did in the past attempted a couple times for an FKT, and just had random issues that happened, and a friend of mine was telling me, like, well, why don't you just go for it? Like just go hike it, like just through hike it. I'm like, that actually sounds really fun. Like,
But
don't
that was when you did those attempts, were you fat adapted at that point, or were you
no,
still?
I was eating garbage, like which is typical of like the through hiking community. Like it's funny that when you look up stuff online, it was like, oh, well, just calories for your buck. And it's like, well, yeah, you can eat top ramen. It's super light and has calories in it, but you feel like garbage. You perform like garbage. You recover slowly. And so you're just like deteriorating every day versus eating like proper
Yeah.
food. Like you can feel good every day and you don't feel like crap. Like that's really what it comes down to. Like you feel stronger, you recover better, you sleep better. You're not going to deal with stomach issues and you're eating less throughout the day as well. So it's like one less thing to worry about. Like you can put in some fat and some food, and like you're kind of good to go.
Well, let's talk a little bit. Let me unpack that a little bit because top ramen is actually a pretty good race fuel for a race. That occasional use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got a lot of carbs and it's got a lot of salt.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, you're using it day and after day to hike. It's just going to degrade you. Um,
Yeah, and that's
and
the thing with hiking too, is like you're rarely at like this high output. It's just a lot
yeah,
of like lower fat burning miles. And it's like, yeah, if you are hitting a climb or something, yeah, your heart rate's gonna go up, but like you're just cruising dirt roads, which is honestly like there's quite a big portion of the AZT that's just a lot of like flatter dirt roads. Like your heart rate's not at 160. Like it's pretty low, honestly. So It's more of
Yeah,
just grinding through miles, and you don't need to be eating straight sugar for that the entire
that's
time.
right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yep, yep, yep. The other thing that's interesting, and I don't know if you've had that experience yet, but I know when I do these big days in the Sierras, by the afternoon, I get into this zone of hyper fat burn
Hmm.
where like I feel on, my body feels on, my mind feels on, and as long as I got my Vespa and my salt and my water, I'm solid. I've got candy on me because I always carry a couple hundred calories of candy, like Bit of Honey, Jolly Ranchers, Loco Chas, which is this Mexican candy I really like. Because it's got a ball. It's a hard candy with a ball of chili and salt in the middle.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sounds very Mexican.
Yeah. Anyway, or Asian. Anyway, but I'll get in this state, this hyper state, and I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but you're just like totally on and focused, and you're moving along. It's not like you're running a 50K, but it's not it's really like 100-mile race pace.
Yeah, it's kind of like a flow state, right? Like
Yeah,
you're
it's
not just
total
going
flow
these
state.
crashes, and you're just kind of focused and ready to go, and it's cool.
Yeah, it's like you say, you don't all of a sudden you're just not your eating becomes what I don't want to eat. I want to I want to crank out the miles.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like just listening to other like through hikers that are a lot more experienced than I am. It's like they're like, okay, like I'm gonna do 200 calories an hour on the hour. Like they just have it on their watches. Like, okay, I gotta eat, I gotta eat, I gotta eat. But if you're more fat adapted, you can have like a larger like meal in the morning. Like I'm doing carnivore bars and keto bricks for like a large portion of my calories, and those are high fat, high protein bars. And it's like you kind of eat one, you're just kind of good. It's like the keto bricks have 1,000 calories in them with like 100 grams of fat or something. Like it's pretty high. And the
Yeah.
carnivore bars are less because they're literally just meat and tallow, and the ones I have honey on them. But like they're super good, and you just feel good, and you don't have to worry about eating. Like you just feel good, and you're not constantly chewing. And like I think like an interesting thing with like through hiking is long distance running attempts as well as like just dental hygiene. If you're eating Snicker bars 5 times a day, like your
Oh
teeth are
God.
gonna feel disgusting. Like I can't even imagine honestly just eating candy like that all day, every day, and then just like, it sounds awful. Like I don't
Well,
know.
and you get a lot of inflammation just in the eating of sugar and the insulin response, but then the
Hmm.
other secondary inflammation, which is a low level inflammation that actually has been very well tied to type 2 diabetes and heart disease, is the inflammation you get if you eat a lot of sugar. You end up with a lot of bacteria in your gums.
Hmm.
You end up with a lot of inflammation, which eventually goes to periodontal diseases. Um, that's it's just a cascade of stuff, and it's okay to have the odd carb here and there, but if you're living off of it to get to your next mile, it's just not right.
Yeah. And this is gonna sound super, maybe this is like TMI for some people. A lot of people are, I don't know, they don't want to hear about dental hygiene, but like the more you just eat like a more like ancestral diet of just like meat and fat and less refined carbohydrates and less sugars and things, like your mouth honestly just feels cleaner every day. Like there are some days where I'm just like, oh, I don't want to brush my teeth because I don't feel like I need to. Like you go to bed at night, you don't feel like you have crap all over your teeth. And I still
Yeah,
do, obviously, like twice a day, but like you don't feel the need necessarily as much. But if you ate like a pound of gummy bears, like you feel that on your teeth. If you have like a Red Bull and a Snickers, you're like, oh crap, like my teeth feel like they're gonna just fall out of my head.
yeah, I know, like they're dissolving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned that, and that brings up something that if anybody out there is listening, they should get a copy of Nutrition and Degenerative Disease by Weston A. Price, dentist, DDS. And Weston Price was a dentist in the 20s and 30s of the last century, and he was he wrote a bunch of textbooks. The guy was brilliant, but he went all over the world to study primitive cultures to learn more about what was the root cause of dental caries and gum disease, all periodontal diseases. Okay. And what he found, to a point of exactly what you're saying, and going back to this evolutionary model, is these so-called primitive people, whether they were in Eastern Europe, like in the mountains of Switzerland, these isolated groups of people who are still living their ancestral lives that they've been living for millions of years, if not, or thousands of years, if not millions of years, they didn't have dental hygiene. They didn't brush teeth. And guess what? They not only had no dental caries and dental disease, but they also had full mouths. They didn't have teeth crowding. They
Mhm.
didn't have all these problems for braces. And he attributed this to what he called the foods of modern commerce. And he even had like twins on the Islands and, off of England. He had twins, and one was on the ancestral diet, the traditional diet of the Jersey Islanders, and one was on the foods of modern commerce. And you could see just by the pictures he took of the teeth and mouth the difference.
Yeah,
It,
and like if you look at like these like the Hadza and these other groups of
the
like
Inuit, everybody, yeah,
yeah, and they call them like primitive or whatever, but it's like they all have perfect teeth.
right,
And it's like they're all white teeth, perfect teeth. Like you're seeing like a full mouth where it's fully put together, teeth are
yeah,
straight
the
and
teeth
strong.
aren't crowding, yeah,
Yeah, and then you look at like just any other like Western culture where we're apparently so advanced, but all our teeth are jacked up. You have to go to the dentist all the time, get your teeth cleaned, you get braces, wisdom teeth removals, and like these people never even think about it because they just don't eat crap every day.
right. And so and so if anybody can get a copy of that, you don't even have to read the book. All you have to do is look at the pictures.
Yeah,
All you
yeah.
have to do is look at the pictures.
Those pictures are worth thousands of words for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So they're to a point about that's some corroborating scientific evidence for what you're actually experiencing, and that brings up a good point I want to talk about in relation to your project with the AZT. Is one of the things I coach a lot of people on is to trust themselves. I mean, it's great we've got all this technology and all this ability to take data, but I see people are so hyper focused that they're chasing the data. So they've got their Garmin or their Coros or whatever the latest device is to GPS track them and take all their data. They've got their Aura ring, they've got their continuous glucose monitor, and they're chasing all these numbers so they can get it perfect. And biology doesn't work like that. It's pretty fungible when you got the right metabolic health and you're doing most of the things right. I mean, and that's kind of a real thing. And it's like, I'm a pilot and I've done a fair amount of flying in my career, but I never made it a career. But I used actually in a former life, I was a test pilot for a while. And one of the things that's real basic when you're teaching somebody how to fly that is called chasing the instruments. And it's like you're supposed to fly to a certain altitude and then hold that altitude. Well, the way it's done is like when you're learning it, it's just like learning to do dance steps. You're all left hand, left feet, and all this stuff. But people chase the instruments because they're looking at that 10,000 foot elevation they're supposed to climb to, or 10,005, and they're trying to hold it. And all they do by focusing on the numbers and the data is they never get it right. They're always either too high or too low. And I see the same sort of thing with people um, over relying on their devices rather than trusting their own native intuition. Once you have your metabolism and physiology right, you got the right guidance, it's a pretty powerful tool. And then what happens is, like I say, the data corroborates the experience,
Yeah, I
right?
totally agree. And I think it's super easy to get lost in the weeds here with things because like
Yep.
you can go on YouTube and look up OFM or keto or something. You're gonna find million, maybe not, I don't know how many videos are, just countless videos about keto and diet, and they're all gonna tell you different things and all these different studies and fruit is bad, fruit is good, meat is bad, meat is good, blah 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 blah. But I think in the end, it just comes down to like not eating a bunch of just refined seed oils and overly processed carbohydrates. Obviously, things are processed to a certain
Yeah,
extent,
yeah. You
no
eat
matter
real
what.
food
But
that'll rot. You eat real food that'll go bad on you.
yeah, exactly. Like things without or like one ingredient in them, which is like berries or meat, that
Yeah,
sort of thing. And you're gonna feel good. And then it's like that's gonna cure probably like 90% of people's issues. And then you can start digging deep and trying to fine tune things. But it's like just if you're gonna be eating Taco Bell every day and it's like, well, I'm taking this one supplement, so suddenly I'm gonna have like this amazing diet or performance. It's like that's not gonna happen. It's like the whole
right.
thing is just have a strong base of eating well. And then you add in things like, okay, I don't know, I'm going to fast today and then whatever, I'm going to use Vespa, I'm going to use these tools, I'm going to use keto as a tool. to optimize your health. And they're just doing keto itself is not going to make you healthy. You can eat garbage keto and like, yeah, you might drop weight, but you're not going to be metabolically healthy.
Well, yeah, and you
And
can eat keto, and if you're eating too many calories, you're still going to gain weight. Still
exactly.
going to
Yeah.
have problems.
Yeah.
And and that's the thing. Like with OFM, what we're doing is we're not only providing the nutritional balance and getting you in either a eucaloric, which means calories in, calories out, calorie balance, energy balance, or a calorie deficit if you need to lose some weight, but we're also building metabolic capacity. And that's the big thing. Keto, because they don't push the exercise enough, you're always going to be on a restrictive diet to carbohydrates because you never build the metabolic capacity to have the metabolic flexibility to be able to have carbs and not have it throw you off the wagon.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's been a lot of evolution in the keto community where they've kind of realized that, at least that's at least from like the communities that I follow within that, like the sub communities anyways. But they've kind of realized, okay, like keto is a tool and like it may not be the best long term. Like a lot of people like don't sleep well when they do keto for months and months and months. But if you do keto for a month and then cycle in some carbs or even weekly, like 5 days on, 2 days off or something, it can really help like with your body to optimize like fat as a fuel, but also be able to tap into carbohydrates when you need them.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like carbohydrates can actually, this is why I call it optimized fat metabolism, not keto, because um, ketones are really a byproduct, but you need the carbohydrates because the carbohydrates will give you that little push to challenge your system, right? And
Yeah.
the human body, in biology, it's all behavioral, it's all based on behavior and adaptation. So when you get these signals, your body's going to react to it. If you're sedentary, it's not going to get that signal, and the signal it's actually getting by not doing anything is senescence, which means you're going downhill. You're sliding downhill towards that eventual end we're all going to face. You're telling your
Mhm.
body, yeah. So that's the signal you get. So your body gets lazy, you get less mitochondria, you get less capacity, and that's why you have to be on a very restrictive diet. Now, but when you challenge yourself, you build mitochondria, you build capacity, and then the carbs are good for giving you that jump to go over, and just a little, not chronic, but just a little carbohydrate here and there will build that capacity to the point where once you're built up, and you probably know this now, you could eat a bunch of sushi one night and all it's going to do is make you go out and run fast the next day.
Yeah. I
Right.
definitely have noticed that too. Like if I'm like super strict and like monitoring things and like with my carbohydrates and my diet and stuff, and then like I quote unquote carb load. Like I feel like I've been saying quote unquote a lot, but if I like
Yeah. Yeah.
eat a bunch of carbs as in like a bunch of fruit or something the night before a longer run, like I feel really good in the morning. I don't even feel like I need to eat in the morning. And generally, like if I eat before a run, I have some sort of stomach distress. And so not being forced to eat a bunch of stuff before a race or a workout, like I just feel good and optimal. And so you're totally right there. So your body's able to use the fat and the carbs. And I think any sort of endurance athlete's going to have some sort of base level of fat burning. It's all about optimizing it, like you're saying.
Yeah. And we could go down a million rabbit holes, which we're not going to do today, about all the secondary and tertiary benefits that are as significant. They're just not obvious in
Mhm.
terms of building that metabolic capacity to get sort of the numbers we're seeing, which is, guys like Jeff and Peter who are living at 7,000 feet, really doing everything pretty much right. You know, they're pushing peak fat oxidation well over 2 grams a minute.
Mhm.
And that's data nobody else has ever seen. Faster, they got up to 1.78 with John Rutherford, and he and I have talked for years about how we knew with Vespa and OFM, by adding in all the other components of OFM, we could go over 2 grams. And then Jeff got it, and I got it with another guy several years ago, and then we started talking about this and getting some more data, and then finally this year we started to collect data, and I'm gonna organize another round again this winter in Phoenix, and I'd like to have you test out, and um, we're going to test it on a bunch of different other people too, just to get a sort of a baseline, um, because there is some independent testing that I didn't do that was totally independent, where after they saw Jeff was able to go over 2 grams a minute on Vespa, they tested a bunch of other athletes, including vegans, all kinds of diets, all kinds of stuff. And they saw that the Vespa actually boosted fat metabolism by anywhere between a half a gram a minute to a full gram a minute.
Which is pretty wild. And it sounds, it doesn't sound real, but then when you see the data, like the data show that, and you can't necessarily argue with that. And
it doesn't sound real, but like, Jeff knows, Peter knows, it's like,
yeah,
it works, but there's no data to support it, but it works for me. Or Nick's, like Nick, he thought it was totally bogus,
yeah,
until he tried it, and it's like, it's working. And now it's good that there's data behind it that's showing that, okay, yeah, what I feel. But that's what it goes back to, what I say is like, that's the thing. It's like, here's something that works and is shown to work for all these people for so long. But the first thing the skeptic will say is, where's the science? And all of a sudden say, well, and then everybody gets doubts about whether it's working or not.
yeah. And what's also interesting too is like you're talking about like this high amount of fat burn and stuff, and so you're essentially just using like the fat you have on your body as a fuel source, which is just from your diet and in your body. But I was talking to a friend the other day who was asking, he's done a little bit of like OFM and keto type stuff, and we are just DMing on Instagram about some stuff, and he's like, oh, I'd like to try Vespa, but it's just so expensive. It's like, well, if you like, I don't know, if you eat properly and then you use Vespa, you're not buying like 10 spring gels for every run. And it's
Right.
like I've seen people go on long runs, and like in springs now are like 350 a piece. So if you're eating a bunch of those on a run, like your run cost goes up like crazy. But if you can do that on like one or two Vespa, like yeah, it's only like $10 or whatever it is, versus the $35 for all those springs or all those goos or something.
Right. The actual cost in use is not that much. It might be a little higher. It might be even. That's what people say. But people like
Yeah.
you or Jeff who get it, it's like, I've had people who are, paying customers, they're paying full retail. Once they get on the program and they get it all right, they say, I'm saving money because I'm not eating a bunch of food. I eat fresh food. I teach people how to shop to save money, and it actually works out to be cheaper. And then that's just in dollar amounts, not just
Yeah.
the priceless health and performance benefits you get from it. Because, you can do OFM on the cheap, including the Vespa and the supplements, because I've been doing this for years and we've been losing money. So I've had to be resourceful, but it's basically, you learn to shop the supermarkets on their weekly ads, because they use, like things like meat, poultry, and fish as what they call loss leaders, to
Hmm.
pull people into the store every week. And so you shop the loss leaders, and then you get the produce in season. Those are all what they call loss leaders, because
Hmm.
they get people in there to buy. And then people buy all the really high margin crap, like the cereal and the crackers and
Yeah.
the stuff in
Candy
the inner
bars.
aisles, not the around the edge of it. And so you can actually do, is it gonna cost you more than, say, a beans and rice and pasta high carb diet? Yeah, but it's going to cost you less than, say, the whole paycheck vegan organic
Yeah.
diet. And when you look at the health benefits, it's going to cost you a whole lot less, and a whole lot less grief, because you're going to be in that metabolically fit part. And you're not going to eat nearly as much as you know. It's just like, it's kind of like odd, because I've got all this food in my refrigerator, and it's like, I got to figure out when I'm going to eat it.
Yeah. And honestly, the best part is grocery shopping takes 10 minutes. Like you go in, you're like, okay, like I need enough meat for what, 3 days or something. I know how much fruit I'm going to eat. And that's kind of it. It's like, you don't have to go and like up and down every single aisle looking for certain things, whatever. It's like, I go grocery shopping, like I'm gonna get meat. Oh, do I need to get salt? Probably not.
Yep.
I'm gonna get some fruit, and usually it's like whatever's on sale or seasonal. And and that's kind of it. Like there, when I'm in Utah, there's a place called Finney Farms. They just have like raw dairy products.
Oh,
And so
wow.
so I'll go
Yeah.
there and I'll buy milk or cheese or something.
Yeah.
So it's like I do make two stops, but it's like in the end though, it's just super simple for grocery shopping, because like I'm sure most people have better things to do than spend 2 hours at the grocery store or an hour trying to find things and whatever. It's like, if you know you're just gonna have like eggs for breakfast, it's like cool, it's easy. Like you just make eggs,
Well,
like
yeah.
butter. It's
And
like it's so simple.
yeah. And as much as I like, I'm not in disagreement for getting like grass-fed beef, and eggs from a farm and dairy from a farm. But when you look at it, when they put the meat and the produce in season on sale, and then eggs and dairy are just dirt cheap for what you're getting.
Yeah, like even if I buy like raw dairy, like yeah, compared to like a normal gallon of milk, which is I don't even know, like $4 or $5 now. Like, yeah, raw dairy costs double, but if you think about it per calorie, that's still really cheap. Like a gallon
Yes.
of milk here that's raw is like $10. And so yeah, that's way more expensive than just say some like Walmart quality milk. But calorie wise though, that's really, really cheap. And then the amount of nutritional value you get from that is incredible.
Right. Well, and the thing is with OFM, Derek, here's the way to use it: is use it after a workout. Have a
Hmm.
glass of cold milk, because one of the things about raw dairy is the IGF thing. That's one of the things a lot of people harp on, the health experts, because people
Yeah.
aren't very healthy. But when you're healthy like you are, if you have milk, you don't have to have it like in a 30-minute window. It's just when you're ready to have something substantial. A cold glass of milk is like is a superfood, because think about it. Milk is what makes little animals grow big, and
Yeah.
it's the IGF in it that helps drive the protein, fat, and carbohydrate that's in milk. It's called insulin-like growth factor.
Hmm.
And so for you, when you're in an anabolic state post-exercise, it's just like drives that not just the recovery, but the adaptation to get stronger and more robust. Whereas in a sedentary person, IGF is a problem because it can drive cell production from excess energy, which can drive cell mutation, which can drive cancer. So IGF gets a bad rap in the context of the quote unquote unhealthy normal world. But in the context of somebody like you, oh man, it's like some of the best stuff out there. And I do that on occasion. I'll stop at my friend Randy's dairy after a big run and get a couple glasses of raw milk right out of the tank.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, it was fun talking to you about OFM and diet and the Arizona Trail a little bit.
Yeah. But before we end, I mean, I'm, I want to inspire people. Like, what your goal isn't to do an FKT. Your goal is really to take in the experience for yourself, but then also film it and share it with others. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like I said before, like I tried to FKT it a couple times and had issues, and really like I love the state of Arizona a lot, and the whole trail is just super diverse, and so I want to spend time on it while also
It's
putting in
super
miles every
beautiful,
day.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's really cool because you're up in the Ponderosas for a large portion of it, you're on the Saguaros, like the Sky Islands are just incredible. And so I want to do it to experience it, but also do it relatively quick. Like I don't want to spend 2 months doing it or something like that. Like I'm still going to put in miles every day, but I'm not going to be like, okay, I have to do 55 miles a day and set an FKT and sleep 4 hours a night. Like I want to have a good experience. And to me, like I love documenting things. Obviously, it's my career as a filmmaker and stuff. So I want to tell a story and show things along the way, but also stay fit and healthy because it essentially would be part of my training. It's basically a big base block as I train for other races throughout the end of the year and coming into next year. But it just has always kind of intrigued me, and I just wanted to do it. And if that means I put in a lot of miles one day and a little bit the next, like I'm totally okay with that. It's more about just having a good experience and seeing the trail for what it is.
Yeah, and you're what you're doing is really finding the balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm not gonna
you're
be
gonna
doing 10 miles a day, nor am I doing 60 miles a day or something. Like it's just
right.
this good balance
You
where it
might
feels good.
average about 30 between 25 and 35 miles a day type of thing, where you're on your feet all day, but you're getting plenty of rest, you're getting plenty of time to take pictures and video, and if there's something particularly interesting, you're gonna stop and experience it. um no, that's super. And the neat thing is this year has been a really fantastic monsoon season, so you should have some the country should be pretty lush and particularly beautiful this year, shouldn't it?
Yeah, when I left Tucson, my last run before I came up here to Utah, like it was just like a green jungle down there, which was wild. And it happened last year too, but in years prior, it's been really, really dry. And so it's cool to see that now everything's damp and growing, which is one end really cool. Also means there's a lot of bugs out. Same thing up here in Utah right now. Like I'm in my truck camper and there's flies and crap because it's been so wet and just dumping rain. But I was just up by the North Rim of the Grand Canyon, and it was just all day rain, hail, and everything is really, really green. And so it's
Yeah.
incredible. And so it's really cool, like visually, but then also it's awesome that there'll be a little more water sources along the Arizona Trail, which is generally kind of like the main issue. Like people do the AT or the PCT, and generally you have a fair amount of water. But on the AZT, that's always kind of the issue is okay, like what's running, what stock ponds are full, where can I fill up? So not that it's going to be like a jungle out there by any means, but it'll be a lot simpler, relatively anyways, to get some sort of drinkable water on the way.
Yeah, but you should be able to film some great stuff because I've got a client in Sierra Vista
Hmm.
down by Fort Huachuca, and the pictures she's posting
Yeah.
on Facebook, I'm like, wait a second, this is Arizona?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
And
like this lush green deer out, and
uh-huh.
it's like, what the heck's going on here? And to a point, like this week was actually the start of what I call my fall running season
Hmm.
because my backyard is the high Sierras. And so I like to spend a lot of time running in the high Sierras, but I always wait till about the 22nd of August to do it because that's when the weather kind of shifts to where you don't have the chance of a afternoon thunder, cumulo thunderhead coming up and having lightning and rain and all that. It gets to be a rare event. Whereas like in the weeks before that, like June, July, or July and August are usually you're going to have something every day. And then this year in August, they had some, the Eastern Slope and Death Valley had some pretty significant rainfall.
Yeah.
And
Washed
that,
out a few roads out there.
yeah, well, there's standing water in the Death Valley basins.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So, this is the time when the weather gets really stable for me, and so I can go and do these all day runs in this areas, and it's just beautiful. And that's why, like, in a week from Saturday, I'm gonna go do Ray Lakes Loop and do all that. So I think that that's probably the weather pattern there for you is the monsoon season is tapering off, and then when you
Hmm.
get this started, it's gonna be like pretty ideal.
Yeah,
So
that's the
I'm
plan.
really excited. I'm really excited for you to do this. And so you got people supporting you, or how are you managing to get to your supplies? Or are you just going to carry a credit card and cash?
Yeah, I'm going self-supported. So I'm on my way up here from Tucson. I came up here for a work thing like a week or so ago and decided to stay. I didn't want to drive home and drive back. And so I stopped along the way and dropped some food caches off. Like if there's various like bear boxes along the way. So you can drop food and water in them and stuff. And usually water is the most common thing in them. But so I dumped off some food and some water, and then there's a few like resupply towns along the way too, like Patagonia and Flagstaff and stuff. So I've shipped some things there. I'm gonna stop at some grocery stores on the way. So it's kind of a mixture of things, and then I have a couple friends helping me out as far as dropping me off and picking me up at the start and end. But for the most part, it's self-supported. So, and like I said, I'm not going for any sort of FKT. So if I see random friends out there and they want to come along the way or whatever, totally cool with that. So it's
Dude,
not
I wish
like,
I could come down and spend a couple of days on the trail with you.
yeah, see why you don't live closer.
I just got, but my dance card with work is just chock full, and I got to make it happen.
Yeah, it's
Because
understandable.
like it's interesting to close, but it seems in the last 6 months, almost all the resistance, the skepticism about fat adaptation has disappeared.
Hmm.
All the high carb people who used to just be very vocal about, um, creating doubt or trashing it or ridiculing it or whatever, that's just kind of disappeared in the last 6 months to a year. And I'm like, oh, I better get on it because everybody's going to want to copy, all this work I've done since 2000. I've been
Yeah.
tinkering away at this and helping people like Zach and Peter and Jeff get those results that they're seeing. And so I've got to kind of get with the program here and kind of get some of the stuff we're trying to do done so we can kind of help a lot of other people realize their potential. And I think the video that you're going to come out of this is going to be, we're going to really try to push this so that we can inspire people, you, me, other people can inspire people to live out their dreams, to actually, you know, do the kind of things that are possible. And, as fat adaptation really helps make that a whole lot more achievable.
Yeah, 100%. So, well, cool. Let's wrap it up then. I I got some stuff to do today, and I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah,
So
I've got stuff myself. So cool.
cool, awesome. Well, it's fun talking to you, Peter, and yeah, we'll talk soon.